The way that academia and industry cooperate is very terrible, to be honest, because in academia in Spain, making money is seen as unholy. When you ask people to do star ratings, they immediately put themselves in the hat of, oh, now I'm a movie critic. At that point, what is the difference between you and any other content distributor? There's no, I mean, you can have better, which they do, better technology and better, but like the price is going to depend mostly on content, because that's the biggest expense.
Começa mais um GigaCast, hoje estamos novamente com um convidado muito especial, hoje vai ter uma entrevista diferente, porque ela vai ser em inglês, igual a gente fez com a Dorcute, depois vamos colocar as legendas aí pra você conseguir ver, infelizmente no áudio talvez não seja o melhor pra você, mas o nosso convidado de hoje, cara, a empresa dele chama Justus, já levantaram mais de 40 milhões de dólares, 200 milhões de reais, pra conseguir construir o futuro do seguro alto, né? Para conseguir fazer com que o seguro alto se torne cada vez mais acessível e justo para os brasileiros. E eles hoje estão crescendo num ritmo absurdo, já tem mais de 100 pessoas na empresa trabalhando nessa missão e a gente vai ouvir essa história toda. Insider Store, cara, especificamente a Insider Business, que é você conseguir colocar a estampa da tua empresa na tua camiseta para você poder dar para os seus clientes, para os teus colaboradores, para ser uma camiseta que eles realmente querem investir, não aquele algodão velho que vai lá pro fundo do armário e tal. E, cara, você consegue, a partir de comprar bastante, você ganha muito desconto do valor original e tal. Então, uma camiseta que realmente vai usar e não vai ficar com esse algodão desbotado. Segunda coisa, cara, a gente vai falar da Latu, cara, que é seguro de responsabilidade civil, onde você consegue, com facilidade, contratar um seguro de cibersegurança, por exemplo, onde se você tomar um ataque hacker aí, perder um monte de informação, você não vai ter que pagar umas indenizações gigantes, porque você vai estar coberto pela Latu. E ao invés de ter um trabalho bizarro para você contratar isso com aquela seguradora velhas antiquadas, você contrata rapidamente com o time da Latu e com a tecnologia deles que automatiza tudo. O terceiro patrocinador é a Gestor com J, a plataforma no-code para você conseguir automatizar as burocracias da sua empresa, onde você com facilidade faz com que o teu time pare de fazer aquele corno job, aquele trabalho ali mega manual que não precisaria estar sendo feito por um humano porque poderia estar sendo automatizado, seja por fluxos inteligentes ou pela inteligência artificial que você consegue fazer com facilidade, sem saber programar e sem você precisar fazer nada. E por último, a Hyper, que é anúncios por geolocalização. Então, por exemplo, se a Danone quer mostrar anúncios para pessoas que frequentam academias, eles conseguem facilmente fazer isso pela Hyper. Tem uma vasta gama de estabelecimentos. Se você já investe mais de 30 mil reais aí por mês em mídia focada em branding, você pode se tornar um cliente da Hyper e ter esses resultados maravilhosos aí, focados muito nesse público que vai ter interesse na sua marca. Welcome, Antonio.
Thank you for having me.
So, Antonio, I know that you were born in Spain. Let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
What's the story? Where were you born? Who was the young Antonio?
So I grew up in Spain.
Barcelona?
Madrid.
Madrid.
And that's it. Be careful. Madrid, much better than Barcelona.
Okay.
So I grew up in Madrid until I was 24. I was very much of a nerd.
During school, you were like the front row kind of person.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I did engineering as undergrad and grad.
Let's wait for the undergrad. What were you like when you were like young? You know, do you have hobbies? Like, were you?
Yeah, I had hobbies. I liked to code.
From early age.
Yes. I mean, I've been like a bookworm and like a builder, like all my life. So basically that
you have some cool projects?
The nerdy kid that gets bullied in school.
Yes.
Yeah, I had so I mean I'm the oldest of 5 siblings. So my I used to get made fun a lot because of my like very random things that I like doing. One that is very random. I was like building like, you know, this is like I'm older than you, like I'm 44 now, so computers were more incipient when I was a kid, and I was building like this like simulator of a pendulum that I couldn't get right because I didn't know differential equations. So my brother would keep making fun of me because that pendulum, instead of like, you know, settling, it would keep spinning farther and farther. Yeah, just random nerdy things, a lot of reading.
What was your like first machine? Like, how old were you when you got your first computer?
Well, it wasn't mine, it was my father's. So I was probably, 13. 13. Very different than now, right? Like,
so it was like Windows?
It was Amstrad. What was the name? So it was DOS. I don't know if that's
OG, man.
so, yeah, like this operating system, and it had BASIC, which was like the operating system that you could use back then, like the programming language that you could use back then.
Oh, that's cool, man. And your parents work in technology or something, or how?
They are both physicians, so no, like
Researchers?
physicians, so clinicians.
Oh,
they
okay,
work in
okay,
the
okay,
hospital.
okay.
Yeah.
I thought they work with physics. No, it's
No.
like médico, galera, só pra quem não manja.
No.
Okay, cool. And they had a computer like just because, or?
Well, my dad, yeah, like I mean, at some point that was like all the rage, right? Like you could like get it wasn't PowerPoint, it wasn't Word, but it was I actually don't remember the names of there was like this spreadsheet program and this like word processing program, and that was the thing. And then a couple of very shitty games in BASIC. Like there was this gorillas game. It was like two gorillas that couldn't move, throwing bananas at each other. But you had the source code, so you could make it two bananas throwing gorillas at each other.
You could change it. And then that's how you started kind of like messing with the code.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Making the bananas.
But it was always more like about solving problems. So like I remember like there was this. So my dad is a physician, so they have this kind of like a scheduling problem that is actually not easy. So like you have like whatever like 10 physicians that are working in the ER, and they have to get assigned to shifts, and everybody has their own constraints, right? Like whatever, John cannot do it on Wednesday, this other person cannot do it, and then you have to figure out how to assign the shifts, and that's an interesting, actually not programming, it's an interesting operational research problem that you can solve with a computer. That's the kind of things that I was interested in. Now everybody's like, I've been always more on the kind of like the applied math and algorithms part of it.
Oh man, that's cool. And then like moving on to college and stuff, you did it in Spain, in Madrid,
so
right?
Yes, I started it in Spain. Like I did my undergrad there. I did my kind of like grad, my master's.
Was there like computer engineering, computer science? Was it popular already?
Yeah. So in Spain it was I did telecommunications engineering, which is very close to electrical engineering and computer science. So like it's kind of like a split. So it's like more on the electrical engineering side. But yeah, like a lot of programming, and because it was telecommunication, and a lot of classes that I didn't particularly care about. Some of them about like antennas and about like how you're like, I know more than I should about like how the mobile phone protocol is for receiving an SMS.
It wasn't useful after all?
No, surprisingly, no.
Man, I actually did the same course, but in Brazil it's electronics engineering with a lot of emphasis in telecommunications.
Yeah. So a lot of that, because I had been working like in hospitals, so just like to make money in the summers, because my parents were physicians, I could help in the hospital moving beds around and whatnot. But then they also had like this amazing machines, right? Like so, like if you've seen a CAT scan or a PET scan or I really like that part, and I ended up moving a lot towards medical imaging within engineering. So I started building medical imaging devices. So that's what I did by the end of my master's. I was building like a CAT scan, so like an X-ray tomograph, and a positron emission tomograph for small animals, and that was kind of like where I was nerding out. So I was actually building the devices.
So you dwell well in hardware.
You
dwell very well in hardware.
I started doing hardware. I had more fun with the software because hardware is ruthless.
Yeah. Why did you say ruthless?
Because it is. Like I mean, like at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter. Like you can be building something for like a very long time, and then for like the most stupid reason the thing doesn't work, and nothing like there's very little that like it's compared to software, like mistakes are very costly, right?
Yes.
So it's difficult to iterate, it's difficult to like if you don't plan everything perfectly, like you
burn everything, you have to restart.
Yes. And even if you restart, maybe it doesn't work. But I was making hardware for a while. So I did that while I was in Spain.
Was it mostly out of curiosity, or you like had the intention to sell it to someone? Like you have a
I w-
business?
we were selling it. So like the lab I was working on, they had like agreement with a medical imaging company and started selling it. This is very different. Spain is very different than the US. So the way that academia and industry cooperate is very is terrible, to be honest. Because in academia in Spain, making money is seen as unholy, right? So like the university is mostly public, and if they do a collaboration with the industry, that has to be kind of it's a gray area. Like it's just all of it. It was very weird. Like there was. So, for example, like my master's thesis, which had like the designs for the X-ray machine, uh, you have to file in your thesis in the university, right? So they have the physical book, but the book has some pages ripped off so that you cannot see the whole thing, even though the book is in the university, because they don't have a way to protect the IP of the private company that wants to use the device later, besides just taking the pages off.
Ripping the page.
Yes, it's so anyhow, like I had it was interesting, but it wasn't like, like if this had been like, I don't know, like in the United States, like we could have a span of a company and I could, but it was much more like, okay, well, we are building this, you get like some salary out of it, and that's that.
And was the product good?
I mean, it worked. Yes.
You were able to get the scans pretty fast,
Yeah.
reliably. It wouldn't.
The important part was getting the maximum amount of resolution with the minimum amount of radiation. So that because like like when you are getting a CAT scan or a X-ray, it's like ionizing radiation is bad for you.
Mhm.
So you should be. So the point was like how much, like, what is the maximum resolution you can get for a given dose of X-rays, right? So in that sense, yes, it was good.
It worked well.
It was very primitive. It needed a lot of improvements that I'm sure they did after I left.
And that was kind of like your first real job?
Define real job.
Yeah, like that you actually like in.
Oh, like a
career and
business. Yes, I think so. Like all the others were like like things you do like when you're a kid to
To earn
get
money. Yeah.
Yes.
And then when you got to this, like, what was in your mind? Like, how did you decide to work in this? Like, was it the first job that came along? Was it?
I'm trying to remember. No, it wasn't the first job. Like I had a couple others. I work in a random kind of like internet property, building their portal back in PHP before Facebook got PHP into a place where it was actually a decent thing to use.
It wasn't decent in the beginning.
No, it wasn't. No, because all these like kind of like server side active, like it wasn't well documented. It worked sometimes with some browsers. There was a lot of fragmentation, so it was kind of painful. Like the web was less developed then.
Yes,
Yeah.
poorly structured at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. People are saying that Next.js is the new PHP. Have you seen that thread?
And then Next.js.
Yeah, they say Next.js is the new PHP, because you have like all the server side and
Yeah.
the client side in the same
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Anyway, but once you got, how long did you stay at this?
How long did I stay where?
Like working with the X-rays and hardware?
My scientific career, right? So like I spent couple of years building that. Then I moved to the US. So I really wanted to get like a career or at least give it a try as a scientist. So I had always at least like being very curious about like MIT and Harvard. And I was like once in a while like I would like send that random email to a Spaniard that was in MIT like, hey, how did you get there? So I got my chance at doing that. Like I started publishing what I was doing on the imaging system, and then in one of the conferences I met like this professor at Harvard that offered me like an
What are
internship.
those conferences? Like scientific conferences?
Yeah. Scientific imaging, very niche medical imaging conferences about where people actually care about like
The few people that care a lot about the technology of
Exactly.
medical imaging.
Exactly.
And then like you was that in the US or?
One was in US, another one was in Spain, but the point is it's almost the same people. So like I met this professor that was kind of like doing something that I was interested in. And at that point, I'm in Spain. I had like a couple of conversations with him on the phone. About like, oh, like, would you take somebody in the lab? Because I was interested because he was related to to like a specific department I was interested in. Well, not department, but coalition. So like between Harvard and MIT, there's like this program that you can get med school at Harvard and engineering at MIT. That seemed like a very good deal
do
to
both.
me. Yes.
So become an engineer and a doctor.
Yes, kind of. At least it's getting halfway one and full on the other. I'll tell you in a bit. But I was very interested in this program, and he had good connections into his program. So I'm like, okay, look, I can go there and work for you, and maybe you can write that recommendation for me. Like, yeah, sure. Like, I mean, just come. Like, I like you set it up. I would be happy to have you in the lab. So I spent like a number of months talking to the secretary, and then like doing like the immigration and like getting everything ready. I sold the things I had, like my car, my.
At this point, you had been approved for the program already, or no?
I had been approved to be in an internship with this guy, so I was not in any program. I was going to do an internship, see if it worked, and then if it worked, he could give me a recommendation, and then I could apply and see, right?
In that scenario, you already sold everything. You're like, okay.
So I moved there, and I get like to Boston. That is very cold in the winter, and I'm sleeping like with a cousin of mine that's like letting me crash in her couch, and the next day like I saw up like in the office of Vasilis, of this professor, and like, hey, I'm here. What's up? And he's like, who are you?
Really?
And like, no, he didn't remember. Like, he had like said yes like months ago. Like, he had many people in the. Anyhow, he remembered eventually.
But was it like an official internship, or kind of he like, yeah?
No,
sure,
it was an of course. I mean, I needed, but all that like I had been setting up with the secretary, with the assistant, with the. I mean,
he forgot about
he's
it.
Exactly. For him, it wasn't that important. For me, it was kind of important.
Kind of important. Sold everything, moved to another country.
Exactly.
Like, who are you again?
Like I was taking it somewhat seriously. So I spent like a year working with him, and I did get the recommendation, and I applied to the program, and I got in, and that was kind of like an interesting thing because you had to be you had to be approved by each one of by MIT and by Harvard, and they are like a little bit of separate processes.
It was like a master's program, or was
PhD.
PhD.
So it's a double PhD. So you get the medicine part and the engineering part.
I see.
Yeah. Well, they actually made me get another master's because the US decided that my Spanish master's wasn't a master's.
Wasn't worth anything.
Yes, exactly. So they're like, you have to take this, and like, okay, well, you pay for it. I'm very fine with that. So I ended up getting too many degrees.
Oh, but you paid for the master's as well?
I didn't pay for anything.
Okay, they paid you to do all the research,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And then, what was the process like for the PhD? Like, you have to do like an application. Was it mostly like publishing research?
So, I mean, the point about a PhD is that you are doing original research, and different universities have different ways of proving that. Like, I did publish like a number of papers. It wasn't exactly a requisite, and it depends on the program. At the end of the day, is an exercise in frustration. No, like I think everybody's ready. Like, you know that you are about to finish your PhD because you can't stand anymore the thing that you are studying or building. But I had a lot of fun. Like, I basically moved from simple kind of like inverse problems. I don't know if you know, like, inverse problem is like, so for example, when you are doing this kind of like X-rays, like, it's very easy. So like, if you tell me what's in the center, it's very easy for me to simulate what's going to show up in the picture, right? But going from the picture to the volume, that's the inverse problem, is a much more difficult thing.
No, I didn't understand. Wait, so if I tell you,
So
what do I
so
tell you?
the forward problem in saying X-ray imaging is you describe what's in the center. So I know what's in the center of the CAT scan, right? Whatever it is.
Like a leg.
Yes, glass,
Okay.
right? And then it's very easy to simulate when I shine the X-ray from here, what I'm going to see in the detector. That's the forward problem. It's easy because it's just line integrals and what's the density, and that's that. If you give me the images but you don't tell me what's in the center, that's the inverse problem. Like, how do I recover what's in the center? That's literally what you are doing with a scanner, right? Like, you are taking all these pictures and then actually reconstructing the body. So that inverse problem is easy in a sense because there's not that much noise. So like if I start in the X-ray source, get into a detector, there's just so many ways that the beam, the X-ray went. I started moving to problems that were more ill-posed, that had more noise. So for example, light, right? So we were doing tomography with light, and light bounces in your body, so there's more noise about like what it's been. And then I moved to electroencephalography and magnetoencephalography, so electric and magnetic fields, which are even more noisy.
So this are multiple approaches to like solving the same problem, or
These are
multiple
different
research?
applications, right? So X-ray, light, electrical fields, magnetical fields, all those, like the common thread is how do you recover the whatever was the activity that was in the center of the scanner. And I spent a lot of time just working on better mathematical methods to solve that. Right?
Yeah, at this point, there were like some solutions, but they were not like very efficient, or like why did you pick this problem to work on?
For the application, so the application was about, well, I started with the application, then later it's more general. But like if you have epilepsy starts somewhere in your brain, and it starts very fast, and typically it starts in a very, very localized in a focus, right? So there's one part of your brain that starts zapping, and then that kind of like expands through the brain. For many epilepsies, there's no good treatment. So the treatment is surgical, and the surgery mostly is just cauterizing. So it's going to disable that part of your brain that starts badly, or at least it was when I was doing this. So it's very important that you figure out what's the smallest piece that you have to resect, right? So it's important that you get in the scanner, in this case, what you are looking at is neural activity, right? So you want to get very good, very high temporal resolution and very high spatial resolution of this activity, so that you see, okay, this is exactly where this thing started, right? Getting both spatial and temporal resolution in the particular modalities that I was using in magnetoencephalography and electroencephalography is difficult, and you have to start. This is going to get too deep into mathematics. Sorry,
But like the point is not going to understand. But I want to know.
But the point is that if you, so you have to take, so you could either treat what you are measuring, the electric fields, the magnetic fields, as pictures. So there's one picture here of what's happening. There's another picture. There's another picture. Each one of these pictures you can try to see what's happening. But if you, instead of looking at it in static pictures, you look at it as a movie, you can exploit something about the dynamics of the system to get better estimates in space and time. I don't know if that helps.
Perfect. So it made like it more specific for the doctors to know where to cauterize. So
yes.
And was it mostly for epilepsy or like for others?
That was the initial application, but then you get better estimates. You can use them for many other things.
Yeah. Did it come to reality?
Yeah. I mean, the fun. So my actually the reason why I stopped, like, I got like less interested about science, is that in science is a lot is about publishing, right? And like a lot, like at least like in the US and in many places, it's about like your publication record. And so I have one way of solving the problem, right? And this other lab has a different way of solving the problem. I know in which particular cases my solution is better and in which your solution is better, and we just keep publishing papers about like how mine is better than yours and you publish about yours is better than mine. Both are right and nobody's right.
So you had a rival?
Not me in particular, but everybody has multiple labs that are so it gets very much to your point. It doesn't really get anywhere besides publications, right? Like it's very hard to move towards like something that it's actually built.
But you mentioned the relationship between the industry and the research in the US being better. Did you get to live that or no?
It is better, no, because there was not that much money in medical imaging at the time, right? I think like it gets better once you are building a product, right? But like if it's more academic, right? Like, oh, well, there's this reconstruction method or this one and this math and let's talk about it. It's different, right? Like, no, I haven't gotten... I have friends that have worked in like, especially in, like in pharma and in biotech, which were like more like fast moving water at the time. That really, like got into a spin-off and whatnot, but not me, no.
And like, did you have a personal thing with epilepsy treating, or like, was it just the research of the professor?
Just with clinical applications, like I think it's nice if you can build things that help people get better lives or less.
So it was mostly like you were thinking about this problem a lot and you saw this opportunity to make it better. Like, okay, this is some good research that I can do. Like, how do you pick your research?
I'm much more moved about the mathematical application than the real application, to be honest.
So it was mostly like, how can I solve this really complex problem? And
not complex, pretty. Actually, it's better if it's simple. But yes, like I like solving problems, and especially,
So what is an attractive problem for you?
Anything. Like I think if you pay enough attention to any problem, everything gets very interesting. Everything. So I've done this, like, I was building hardware. Then I started working into a reconstruction. Then I started working more on the mathematical side. Then it doesn't really matter. If you pay enough attention, any problem is very interesting. That's my...
It was a work kind of like very lonely, or no? Just like wake up and work in this thing that only you care about, that like...
Yeah. Well, it's not only you, but...
So there was a team working on it.
No, but it's not only you. Somebody else somewhere. I'm sure they care. No, I don't know. I don't get lonely solving problems.
So it was just like you would wake up like in the morning happy, and then like, okay, this is the next step of the mathematical.
I'm writing in my notebook.
Man, this is crazy. When did you decide to like move on?
When I was finishing my PhD, there was like that. That's the moment of like, oh, like, do I want to like get to keep going into academia or not? And it was like around 2009.
How many years have you been in this right now?
Just 5. I planned on 5. I did 5.
Okay.
Yeah. 5 years of PhD. Got
At this
2
point,
PhDs.
you were like 30.
At that point, I was 30. Yes, exactly. And it's like the housing kind of like crisis is in full blown, and Spain got hit super hard, and I was like, well, maybe I'm not going back to Spain right now. Although I had like a job offer there, so I didn't want to stay in academia. I was thinking about moving to Spain, but I decided against it. And I decided that I was going to make money, so I took a job in Wall Street. So I started doing something completely different for a little bit.
So this was the new problem you're working on: how to make money quick.
No, actually, it was interesting because the reason why. So I don't know how much you remember of like the subprime crisis, but it was just like very bad measurement of risk, and specifically of coupled risks, right? Like that's what like all these brought down the house. So I took a job in Goldman, being the police of the brokers, the mathematical police. So I wasn't a broker. I was actually overseeing what type of models they were using, whether they were valid, how they were calibrating them to market, and kind of like having conversations with the specific trading desks if we saw that they were taking risks that they shouldn't be taking.
But with like mortgages specifically, or
No, I mean, Goldman is very specific. So I was working on derivatives based on commodities volatility.
I see.
So very specific market.
I see.
It was a very interesting time because inside of Goldman Sachs, I was the no fun police person, right? And then when I was getting out of Goldman Sachs, I had Occupy Wall Street in the square, and also I was the persona non grata. So it was a.
What were you doing at this point?
I was working at Goldman. Every time that I was getting into Goldman Sachs, there were people camped outside in New York protesting the financial system,
I see.
right? And then inside, I was also not the...
So outside, like, you're a monster, you work at Goldman, you're destroying society. And inside, you're like, you're a monster, you're not letting us make money.
Exactly, exactly.
And how was the job? Like, you look at like the trades that they were...
Goldman Sachs?
Yeah, because they were
That's
not...
amazing.
They were like selling the trades, right? They were not necessarily making the trades.
Well, Goldman does everything. So Goldman has one side that is a market maker, that's like... But then they also have like another side that has like trading desks making trades, and then they have, so they, in theory, everything is Chinese walled, but they have like very different sides to it.
Who would be mad at you?
Huh?
Who were the guys that were mad at you?
The traders.
The traders that were
because the traders. So the way the trader works, in a way, it's not that that Goldman is paying you. Goldman is kind of like letting you borrow money,
yes,
and then you share on the profits. Right.
Yes.
So you are very motivated to make profits, and there's a very specific type of person that ends up being a trader, and they are not shy, and they are not, they are very risk happy, and Goldman knows that because they are letting them borrow money, and because there's like the incentive is a little bit weird because they share on the profits, but the profits are computed on the basis of some pricing model. Like they are not, it's not like a pile of dollars you have like a pile of derivatives that are very complex contracts that need to get a price, and they get a saying, the trader does, in how much that thing is worth. So there's like a parallel kind of like system that is trying to value how much is it worth at the end of the year, and if the trader is very off in a very particular way, then you have to have a conversation with them. So they don't they don't welcome you.
I see. So essentially, what you would look at like their mathematical models to what they were pricing it, and you say this is shit, and then
because those models need inputs. So you have a model to value a particular derivative, right? But that model needs an input on in the market, what is this, what is that. Those inputs the trader also puts in, because they are the closest to a market, and that's a problem, because then the trader gets to say how much is it valued, what he's making for the bank, and then he gets a cut in the profit. So he has an incentive to say that what he's holding is worth more, and what he's owing to others, what he's short, is valued less.
I see, because the price is not like public data. It's something that the
price is like something that is a very complicated mathematical formula based on things that are observed in the market. So then you get other people that, like me, that tries to find other ways of pricing those derivatives, tries to validate the models, and then looks at, okay, desk by desk, what looks normal and what looks off.
Let me try to explain in Portuguese to the audience.
Yeah.
Então a galera chegava, basicamente tinha esses traders que tava pegando o derivativo de commodity que tava variando lá. Então vamos pegar o exemplo aqui, o cafezão. O café tava variando igual doido. E aí ele chegava e o trader chegava e falava assim, pô, eu acho que esse negócio vale isso daqui, mas ele tá tradando, o preço que tá no mercado tá esse daqui, então eu vou comprar. E aí ele tinha uma fórmula matemática para ele colocar lá como é que era o preço. E aí o trabalho do nosso querido Antônio era fazer uma outra fórmula de matemática para não deixar o cara dar golpe no banco, entendeu? Para ele não chegar pro banco e falar assim, pô, tava custando menos, tá custando mais, e minimizar as perdas do banco e tal, e muitas vezes também minimizar o ganho que o trader ia ter. Yeah, maybe.
Muito bom.
Yeah, kind of like that?
Same.
Simple. Okay. And then how long did this last?
Oh, in Goldman I was only a year because so there's a point that that you do think about like the consequences, right? And the one interesting one for me was Goldman has this Goldman Sachs commodity index that lets you invest on things that you are not holding, commodities that you are not holding. So you can be trading on whatever, the wheat or the corn in Ghana without actually having to move it. And there were a lot of studies, and I mean, this is difficult but it kind of makes sense to me, that as New York starts trading with whatever, like the corn of a much poorer country, there's this balancing out, and then corn in that country starts being more expensive, and right, because there's some equalization. So I had like a lot of conversations about that with like people in Goldman, and their answer, which is not a bad answer, is like, well, if we don't do it, somebody else will do it, right? And like, yeah, but that's, like, do you want to live like thinking, oh yeah, like my job is,
you're making people in Ghana hungry,
and also like your excuse for yeah, but like if I wasn't doing it, somebody else would be doing it. Well, I'll let somebody else do it.
You can sell drugs as well,
Somebody else will do. So I decided to move to Netflix, which I had like a couple of friends there, and this is very early Netflix. Like DVD by mail.
Wow. 2010?
When I was joining, it was, this was fun. And this is before they did a 7-to-1 split. But like, I think the stock was like at 300. So like I took the job like in June. And I accepted, and then by August I had moved there, and I remember when I was interviewing like Reed, because it was small, like I was interviewed by like Reed and a couple others, like were like, oh, like we have this thing and it's going to be great because we are going to start streaming.
Was it a hot company at the time?
I mean, Netflix was a very large company, yeah, like but it was like mostly US, right? So they had US, and then they had. They were starting in Canada the kind of like the streaming only thing, but the DVD operation was very profitable. It was like a great company. They killed Blockbuster. They did like a number of things well.
And they were IPO'd already.
Huh?
They were IPO'd already.
Yeah. And then they started giving like a free streaming subscription with the DVD, because that was kind of like the plan that Reed had. It's just that he got ahead of himself. So what happened during the summer is that Netflix decided to split the service in two. So Netflix was going to be, I think, the streaming part, and Quickster, which was like a brand that nobody knew about, or it was the other way, it doesn't matter, one or the other. So customers that were having DVDs and free streaming now will have to be paying for the streaming if they wanted to keep it, and pay what they were paying for the DVDs without the streaming. So there was nothing really for the customer in there, besides the fact that then Netflix could focus on what was clearly the right idea, streaming and building this and like.
Was it clear at the time? Because you were
for Reed, yes.
Yeah. Everybody was kind of like, yeah, screw this business that gives us all the money. Let's focus on streaming.
Reed was, yeah. Reed was completely, and like I think like if I have seen somebody see in the future clearly, is Reed. He's in this what it was very interesting because I've seen him be like best CEO of the year, worst CEO of the year. Like doesn't matter, but like he he knew where he was driving. So the point is like when I accepted, I was like Netflix was like $300 per like the stock price. When I joined, like 2 weeks after, it was 50.
Wow.
And like it was interesting to see a company like going like such good culture, such strong kind of like clear like guidance. Like he was very clear of like like yes, I made a mistake. Everybody's going to forget about this in a year, so just keep focusing on like making things better. And that's exactly when I joined. It was very interesting because that happened, and then things were still bad, meaning bad in, well, there's still like all this uncertainty and streaming is unclear and whatnot. And then I don't know if it was 6 months or 9 months after, like he does another town hall and he's like, well, don't freak out, but we are buying a house. And what he meant by that was that we were paying, I don't remember, $10 million for House of Cards, which was like the first like Netflix original. And like he kept doing this thing, right? Like where like other people would be afraid or apologetical, he was very, very clear in this is why I think this is happening. This is why I think this is happening. This is what we are doing about it.
Like very first principles thinking. You just like believed it.
Yeah, and conviction. Yeah, like okay, yes, like right now, bandwidth is not good for streaming, but it will be. Right now, the content is not there, but it will be. Right now, there's not enough broadband penetration in the U.S. or in the world, but we are heading towards that. And like very clearly, like thinking in years, not in days or months.
Implanting the seeds.
Yeah.
Man, that is so bold and crazy.
Yes.
I'd love to hear a little bit, like coming from Goldman Sachs and from research, like, and you got it to Netflix, which has a very specific culture. What were the things that you remember the most that you were like, wow, this is interesting? Like,
Netflix, I loved it. So the whole freedom and responsibility was great.
Can you detail more?
It's on everything. So there's very, very few rules besides common sense. It's a very specific culture. I think in order to get that culture right, you have to have the ability to hire very expensive people, which is what we were doing continuously, right? Like we had like, specifically, I think like in startups, it's very hard to kind of like really map that very culture, because in startups you typically get more people that are early in their career, that are junior, that have like like this kind of like high growth trajectory, but that they still need to they're not completely professional. They have like a lot of potential, but they are. But in Netflix, pretty much everybody was senior. So it was very easy to work with everybody. There was no red tape. Everybody was allowed to do basically whatever they were interested on. But you are like in a place where most people have like many, many years of experience. And the ones that don't, like me, I was coming from research, but like I had done like my PhD. I had like, so it's not fresh off school.
So everyone had to be very responsible, since there were like not very strict rules.
Yeah, well, everybody will be very responsible because there are consequences to your actions. But like, yeah, like typical things like no budget for anything, no vacation day. Like you don't have to count the number of days that you go on vacation. You don't have to be thinking about like your expenses, but with the assumption that you are going to be responsible with it.
And then like, would there be like a lot of rotation that people that wouldn't fit the culture, or?
No, because because a strong culture already serves as a very strong filter, right? So if you start telling people like the culture deck was famous for a number of things, right? One of them was well, this was like made by Patty McCord, but like Reed was very much behind this. So one thing that they were talking a lot was about like this bozo explosion, which is, you know, A players hire A players, B players hire C players. So if either you keep excellence or it devolves into, again, something very easy to say when you can pay for it as a company. But there were a couple of like very interesting sentences in the culture deck, like you know, uh, exceptional players will be given an exceptional compensation. Great players will be given a great severance package, and that is an interesting way to welcome people into your company, right?
That
It's
is
like,
in the process, the hiring process. You'd see that.
yes, and that kind of like filters out for people that like the challenge. That like the way that I was thinking about that is okay, great. That's going to make me be surrounded by excellent people. For other people, it's going to be, what about if I'm not excellent? They are going to fire me, and that's a filter.
It's kind of like, oh, there's gonna be too much expectation. I don't know if I can have the work-life balance.
Yeah, well, the work-life balance was amazing. It was more about like the security, like I guess like the job security for some people, right? Like thinking, I mean, it's the opposite of, I know, Google. You can't get fired from Google even if you try, right? Like,
But in the end, like, because you had this filter, people will not be fired that often because
they would. I mean, they would if they didn't deserve to be there, but the point is they yeah, no, I mean, I don't know what the attrition rate was, but like not much higher than any other company I know. What is different is that every time that somebody was let go was announced, which was not something that you typically see in many companies, and I do think that it's important to keep the accountability.
it's something that you brought on to Justus as well.
Yeah, but not because I think it's a very weird situation, especially when you are small, that you know you have like a company that you are like 15 and then the next day you are 14 and there's no explanations given by the person responsible, and it's a failure on the hiring person no matter what happened later. Like, I mean, if I brought somebody in like and it didn't work out, it's obviously on me, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that we've tried, that this is what has happened, that there is some level of transparency. I don't know at what point or scale you stop doing this, right? But in the very early times, like, it's important that you own it and that you help the as much as you can later the person that is let go or that leaves or whatever it is, and that the company has a conversation about like what happened there.
And how large was the team at Netflix when you joined?
Like,
Around?
I don't know. When I say like around 500, I don't know if it's,
Yeah, so even with 500, they would still announce whenever someone was fired.
yeah, and when we were like in Netflix on and off, I was 6 years. So by the end of it, it was, I mean, it wasn't to everybody, but it was definitely to the people in the teams. I don't know how many we were, but like thousands
I see.
when I left.
And then, like, from the hiring process, can you remember something else that you thought was interesting?
I mean, that I had a full interview with the chief people officer was interesting. Not really. Like, I mean, I had a lot of fun. Just interesting problems. I went there to do, well, at this point I guess it would be machine learning or AI, but like I was building there like the recommender systems for a while, and that's a problem that I still think is one of the most fun things I've done. This is like such a interesting intersection of like applied mathematics, but also like you get to understand people and how they behave. Like that's the part that is really interesting for me, of like direct to consumer, kind of like really getting to know people, not for what they say but for what they do.
And what was the metric they were trying to grow with the recommendation system? Like, how much they would choose your recommendations?
No, it's it was number of hours enjoyed kind of, right? Like, I mean, like you don't count all the time that you spend in the UI trying to find a movie. That's not a metric you want to maximize, or minutes of pieces of content that you end up not watching. So it was like quality minutes enjoyed, because it's a subscription service, right? So the idea is that if you are getting some value out of it every month, then you are happy with it, yes. And so if we can help you find better things to watch, then you are happier and the business works better. So we were using that metric because that's a kind of like a good proxy leading metric for retention. So if you consume a little bit more, to especially on the early on the low numbers, right? Like, so getting people that don't watch to watch is much more important than getting somebody that is already watching 3 hours to watch 3 hours and a half a month. So there was some calibration in there.
So to engage people that were not spending that much time by suggesting the right shows for them.
Yeah.
In the beginning, there weren't that many shows, right?
In the beginning, there were a lot of shows, actually. It was the opposite. So at the beginning, Netflix was a content distribution play. So they could get everything on DVDs and a little bit on the even when we went to streaming.
So you started recommendation systems for the DVDs, not for the streaming.
Yes, and the streaming, which was better and worse for many reasons. But on the DVDs, you had everything, literally everything, because the way that the legality of DVD rentals works in the US is a little bit different than, say, in Europe. So, like, as long as you have a DVD, you can rent pretty much. So you could buy pretty much all the... Then we got to streaming, and at the beginning, streaming, there were also quite a bit of content until we started creating our own content, and then we were the competition, and then many of the shows were not available anymore because Netflix was in competition with the providers of those shows. So content started, and actually the recommendation problem for a bit really changed, because at that point the business goal is not necessarily to get you to watch, is to get you introduced to new content that you don't know, and that's a different kind of play.
Right? Why?
Because you have to think about, like, which type of UI, which type of information you need, right? Like, so, like, if I'm suggesting to you, I don't know, like Indiana Jones, you already know it. It's just a matter of, like, where do I show it to you? If what I'm trying to recommend to you is a show that you've never seen, then you actually have to think about, like, hey, how do I introduce this? Like, do we put a trailer? How do we make this happen? It's not just the box art in front of you. That doesn't mean anything to you. So it was like it got a little bit more, in a way, similar to advertisement than, before it was like you were in a library and I was giving you something that you knew. Now it's more about, like, I have to sell you something that you don't know about.
How would you do that programmatically? Like, you have the scripts for the trailers, kind of, or?
There's many ways. I mean, one fun thing about Netflix is that even the box art is different for different people. So, like, the same movie, when you see it in the UX, is going to have a different picture in it than for a different person, even though it's the same movie, because there are aspects of that movie that we think are going to resonate more with you based on what you have interacted with in the past. So that's one aspect of
it. There was like a team that would keep, like, having multiple box arts so that you could, like, have it testing.
There were before, yes. So there was a lot of manual tagging at some point, and that kind of, like, I'm sure they've continued it, but, like, more and more we have
AI automation.
Yes. And I assume that they are doing, like, that part. I missed that because I left, like, years ago, but I'm sure, like, they're doing a lot of, like, Gen AI at this point.
So at this point, when they started doing their own shows, it was quite controversial, right? Because it's not obviously better for the consumer, right? Because they had like all the shows before, and now like they have more shows, but they have also like the less ones that are well known and that maybe they wanted to watch.
Hmm.
Was it like mostly for optimizing profits or like from a vision that?
It's for actually having a business, right? Like, so at some point you have to create content, otherwise you are going to become nothing, right? Like, you can't be like, what's the mode? If you are just like distributing some other people's content and you are one up among others, uh, there's no differentiation, right? Like, what's there's no defensibility in the
So the vision was kind of like more people are going to start doing this. It's going to become more and more competitive for us to have the licenses for all the shows.
Mhm.
And like unless we start doing our own content, we're going to soon have our margins very crushed. And
And also, like, we are not. I mean, at that point, what is the difference between you and any other content distributor? There's no. I mean, you can have better,
Just the
which
price.
they do better technology and better. Yeah, but like the price is going to depend mostly on content because that's the
Yes.
biggest expense, right? So I think that was unavoidable that you could start doing that.
And what do you remember was the kind of like the most interesting problem that maybe you worked on from the recommendation perspective?
I mean, all of them were very interesting, but one that was fun was the. So Netflix used to have, especially from the DVD days, this like a star rating system. So like you could watch, like you could put like 1 to 5 stars to things, and then and actually that was like the first like Netflix challenge that they did was about like predicting these star ratings. But turns out that stars, and this has to do with the UX, and like when you are building like any kind of like product that has data, it actually many times the UX is the most important thing. So when you ask people to do star ratings, they immediately put themselves in the hat of, oh, now I'm a movie critic, right? So like I know the answer to this. So like if I give you Casablanca, everybody's going to say, yeah, I know the answer is 5 stars. You're never going to watch it, but it's 5 stars because you know it's a classic and blah blah blah. So they were not very predictive of for what we cared about, which is, are you going to enjoy this? Because you give stars to things that you don't necessarily enjoy. So we switched that to thumbs up and thumbs down, yes. And those also weren't working very well for a bit. And there were so many interesting learnings in there about how to make them work. Of course, there's all this cool and nerdy part about like I think it was with the thumbs the first time that we did like a deep learn model for recommendations and so on. But that's now is what you do. But there were a couple of very interesting things. So one was like people would do thumbs up and thumbs down for reasons that were not necessarily related to them enjoying the movie. So one of them was like in countries where, you know, like the TV is shared, so like the households are like, you know, families and blah blah blah. There were a lot of thumbs down to racy content. So like, you know, like if there was like a woman like sexual content or enticing in they would watch it and then they would use the thumbs down to because they thought that way it wouldn't show up later for the for the
other
family.
people, okay, yeah. And you didn't have the profiles at this point.
No, we had them and they were not using them, which is the point of having a. But even if you have a profile, think about it. Like you are trying to hide something.
Yeah.
So the way to fix that, part of that was obviously like on the data and like understanding and better modeling. But another part was just like adding a remove from my watch list. So
How would you find that out though? Because people don't call you telling you that, right?
No, you look at the data and look at the data and look at the data.
You're like, why in these places like they're always some.
Yeah, there's a lot of like fun. Yeah, exactly. And that part of like like sometimes I feel like there's much more like science and in companies, especially companies that have like this level of. There's much more interesting kind of like social experiments that you can do or observations or learnings than in the university. I was going to say, another one that was fun. So we were getting. So one of the signals that you use for recommendation is like this clustering, right? So you're clustering people by, you know, people that are in the same cluster tend to watch the same content, and so on. So you can like start breaking down like the population in clusters. They are not mutually exclusive. And one way of looking at if the clustering is working is like looking at like what the groups look like, right? And they can get very specific. So like they can get like, oh, okay, this is about kids because there's kids content, but then like if you really get the clustering right, you start getting within kids. Oh, these are like kids that like trains, because all the characters in the have wheels, right? So there's like cars and like kids shows for kids that like wheels. And then we got this cluster that was so weird because it had like all these kind of like like bro movies, so like action movies, like The Rock and whatever, and then a lot of My Little Pony.
Really?
Yes, and I was like, this is clearly broken, except that it wasn't. And there's this like group of people that call themselves bronies, like bros that like My Little Pony, that they have a conference, like a yearly conference. It's BronyCon. But like I learned about that because I couldn't
Because of the
believe,
clusters.
because I was like, this doesn't make sense, but it does.
And you had like people calling the customers, kind of like find out, or just
No, like we just I say, okay, well, they like it works, like I mean, once we identify them properly, we give them the movies and My Little Pony, and they are very happy.
the clustering was working. Right?
Yes, it was working.
And now a little more related to you in the company, like how was your kind of like job progression inside? You said
I started doing the kind of like research, so like prototyping of new recommendation algorithms. Then I led the group, the research group on recommendation algorithms. Then I quit for the first time. And then when I came back, I was director of product innovation, so overseeing all from prototyping to productization. So talking to a research group, that was a very fun job to have.
and what was this gap in the middle?
Well, at the beginning, I moved to Mexico to do nothing for a couple of months. I just took a break. I had been working. So when you are in the US, so I studied, then I got the OPT, then I got the green card, right? Until I got the green card, I couldn't really take a break because then I could lose my status.
Yes.
So I got the green card. So I took a break.
So you went like non-stop working like crazy for
I
too
mean,
long?
not crazy. You take holidays, but you have to be working for a company, right? So you can. I mean, you can still take vacation, but you cannot take a sabbatical. And I wanted to take like a little bit of time to think. And then I met Jorge, who is like one of the co-founders at Justos, that was doing something different at the time.
In Mexico?
I met him in Mexico, and he was moving to San Francisco. So he convinced me to go back to San Francisco and start working with him. And that was my first startup. And we were 7, and we were doing something crazy, as we were doing cancer diagnostics. So kind of like doing the lab work and the computer work and the programming work and the business development work and the among 7 people. It was very fun.
So you went back to medical research.
Yes, I did for a bit.
And what happened? What was the story?
So we started building on this technology that worked for, well, actually microRNAs later got really famous with COVID, but I had been working on them with Jorge. So we were looking at basically we had this technology to detect microRNAs in blood, and we were using that to develop a test for gastric cancer that was cheap. Gastric cancer is a problem mostly in the kind of like the developing world. For some reason, gastric cancer is very prevalent in the Pacific Rim. So all the countries that are um, that have the Pacific Ocean that are not very similar, right? Like Chile and Korea are not very similar. They have like a high incidence of gastric cancer. It's very curable if it's detected early, but you need like a good way, like a cheap way of detecting it. So we were building that based on this test.
Okay, so you say ulcer, right? Not cancer.
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 Gastric cancer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Gastric cancer. So like when you are like in stage 1, if I get it right, you are going to have like a, like a 5-year survival of 90%. If I don't detect it and you keep progressing on the next stage, it's going to flip. So it's very important that you detect it early.
And there was a way to detect it, but it's not very cheap.
Exactly. Yes.
And what was the way to detect it?
There's a number of ways, but I mean there's like biopsies but like this was like a cheap blood test in the that you can do a screening at scale without for people even before they are having symptoms, and it looked great, but hardware is very difficult, as I told you, and it yeah. We didn't progress as fast as I was hoping for. So after a couple of years, I didn't I stopped working with them like full time. I still was a fan, but and I always enjoyed working with Jorge. So
Jorge left as well?
Jorge left many years after. So I did this company Miraculous, then I did another startup in Madrid called Clarity AI about the measurement and optimization of sustainability.
That's before coming back to Netflix.
That's after Netflix. So
Okay,
I did
so-
Miraculous, then Netflix, then Clarity, which is my second startup.
With Jorge as well, or no?
That one was with old friend from Spain that had been starting that company.
And how did you get into this boat?
I mean, we had been talking about this for a very long time, like ideas and whatnot, and she had already started it and gotten the funding. So I was running out of excuses not to take the risk. So I did.
And what was the business?
So basically for asset managers and asset owners, so things like pension funds, but also investment advisors or even banks, measuring the sustainability of their portfolios, right? So there's like things like ESG that got very famous at some point. It's a measure of sustainability-linked risk. So it's a way of measuring things that are not necessarily on the price of the asset, right? So is this good for the planet? Does this company have good governance? Is it a good thing for society?
What is good governance in this context?
Good governance. Good governance is many things, so I don't remember right now the metrics, but it has to do with corporate governance, right? Like, is it transparent enough? Does it have the right set of procedures? Does it have like the right policies?
But like good governance,
Governance. Yes.
good governance, but not like business wise. It was more sustainable.
Also business wise, because it has to do with ethics, right?
Mm.
So like, is there transparency? Are there yeah.
I see. And how did it go?
The company is still going. It's so I stayed there 3 years, I think. But they're still. I mean, they got invested by BlackRock. They are now at, I don't know if the valuation is public, but it's definitely
Large valuation.
yes, large valuation.
And then you stayed there for 3 years, but why not longer?
Cultural differences.
Yes.
Yes.
So it wasn't in the beginning it was something, and then started growing to something
Mhm.
different.
Yeah. Sometimes it happens.
Yes.
When I think, especially when the company, so with Jorge Daval and myself in Justos, we started this from the beginning. We had like deep conversations about what type of company we wanted to build, how did we wanted to build, what were our kind of like, not necessarily conditions, but like, I mean, there's things I don't like, that I've learned I don't enjoy doing, right? So we had all those conversations, but with clarity, that was kind of like the company was started, and then I joined.
There was funding, there was the culture, and you joined, right?
Exactly. So I think like those things happen very early in the company, and they are kind of like irreversible. So looking back, I'm not surprised that it ended up happening, because you can't be like a late co-founder, or at least I think it's going to be very difficult to do that. And that was kind of the situation. So like you are taking responsibility for it, but you didn't have a say on how it was built, and that's not.
Yes, I had a hard time with that as well. But me being the guy that started early in my company, I had a co-founder that came from Nubank, but like when he decided to join, he had like this huge like vesting thing with the stock at Nubank and stuff. So he had to stay for 6 more months. And like in this 6 months, the culture happened, you know? So I was running it, so I did it the way I thought it was good. And when he came in, he was like, okay, this is not my company, this is your company. So even though he like enjoyed working, he was like, I don't feel like a co-founder because it's not the way I wanted to build it, right?
Because there's so much that is happening at the very, 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 very beginning, right? Like, I mean, which type of investors you go with, who are like your first hires, like how do you work with them, what are the values, not the ones that you write in paper, but the ones that you're actually living every day. So I think it's impossible to catch up.
It's very important to have a very open conversation about this with your co-founders. Even if they join late, you should always like, okay, you're joining, I want to hear everything that you want, everything that you care about. This,
right? And I think like in the first time that you do it, it's so difficult, because I mean, at this point, it's the third one, plus having worked in other companies, not startups, but other companies, you know yourself a little bit better, right? Like, you know which are the things, or at least what are the failure modes that you've already seen. But if you are like in your first company, even if you try, which you should definitely try to have these conversations. I don't think you know yourself. Like, I think like building businesses with people really makes you know yourself, right? Like it tests you in ways that you can't anticipate.
Yes. Where are we now? We're like 2018 maybe, because it was 6 years in Netflix.
Where are we? I don't know. So we did 6 years in Netflix, on and off, because I got out of there, went into Miraculous, did a little bit of Airbnb, went back.
Oh, you went to Airbnb at some point?
Yeah.
Where was that?
In San Francisco, but it's so long. I did Airbnb was a company that really wasn't for me. I spent there only 7 months. I liked the job, like I liked what we were doing, but like Airbnb is a company that was built by designers. Like the two real co-founders, like are designers, and that shows everywhere. Like, meaning it wasn't about like what we were building or how we were building it. It's how about, and it's worked wonders. And I understand that for Airbnb it works, right? Like, I mean, you have the aesthetics and you have the feeling and the experience. But I was getting in there to do better like recommendations and search, and it was just not. It was the polar opposite of like Netflix, of like, oh, just let's build it and make it nice and it'll be okay. It was much more like kind of like from top down. This is how it has to look. And it's like I don't know that I can do that for you.
So it's kind of like in Netflix, you'd have the recommendation systems where you'll be like, oh, this is not working. We have to change the design so that the recommendation systems work. And they were like, okay, let's do it. And Airbnb was kind of like, we have to change it so it works. And they're like, no, you change your algorithm so
but
that
like,
it works with this design.
Yeah, for example, well, but now it's not recommending like the pretty houses. And like, yeah, but like, I mean, well, what is the metric, right? If you want to get bookings, these people cannot afford but like they have to see them, and I get it, like but then how do you quantify that metric then, right? Like there's because it's also aspirational. But then, so anyhow, it was a fun experience. That was the most Silicon Valley experience I've had by a long shot. Like the offices were, like you get into the building, the offices were like exact replicas of their best rooms across the world. The chef in the restaurant was coming from like a Michelin star. There were like 32 different taps of beer. They had their own kombucha made in the, like it was
Yeah,
just,
I've been to their office. It's really beautiful.
yeah, it was great. It was great. That part was great.
And this was like right after Netflix and before Clarity?
It was, no, it was, I think it was Airbnb, then Netflix, then Clarity.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And
And
then-
then finally Justos.
And Justo started what year?
Justos, I think
2019 maybe?
I think this August will make 5 years since we started the WhatsApp group. Like Jorge, Daval and I started a group in WhatsApp. It was like it was clear, like I was on my way out of Clarity. Daval was also thinking about like what was next. Jorge was on a sabbatical, and like I had known Daval for a very long time.
And how did you meet Deval?
Kind of related to Miraculous, to the company. So Jorge knew him. He came to San Francisco. I think like the first thing that we did together was like playing like some soccer game in San Francisco. I don't typically play soccer, so that was an interesting way. But yeah, like through Miraculous. But then I became really good friends with Davan. With Jorge it was great, just the work relationship, but I became more of a friend with Davan. He started his companies and like I saw him working as an investor, but as a friend, and like I really got to know him well. And with Jorge I had worked before, and it just felt like the right group of people. And I think like when you are starting a company, because we didn't know at all what we were going to do. We just knew that it was going to be the three of us.
And how did you know there was going to be the three of us? Like, how did that come along?
Because it was a great team. I don't know, like I mean, like it's just like at some point, like okay, if I did like years ago, I told Daval like, look, like if we do something in the future, which we should bring Jorge, and at some point the opportunity appeared, like like things aligned, so like the three of us were, so we started thinking about what it is that we were going to do.
And then this whole like thinking process, I imagine like everyone didn't drop whatever they're doing and started thinking. Was like that?
Yeah, we were like basically every week somebody will cover one topic, and then on that topic ideas, and then we would be doing this like every week or a couple times a week. We also talked with many VCs about fishing for ideas more than and like trying to understand the market. That was surprisingly effective in like typically you think about VCs about like it's the last thing you do, right? Like you first get the idea and the product, and then you go to the VC and see. But they also had like very interesting like things to tell us.
They were helpful.
Yeah.
That's something you recommend to founders searching for an idea.
Yeah, like I think I'm not sure if like first-time founders will have that access. Like we were lucky because like we already had like some connections with VCs. But for us, if you have that option, that was very interesting because at least getting a sense of, unfortunately, if you are going to do unfortunately, if you are going to get a VC funded company, you are going to need VC money. So you need to understand if the type of ideas that you are looking at, like what's the intersection between what you are motivated for and what is fundable, right?
And was it obvious for you guys that you want to have a VC-backed business?
Yes, I think so.
And why do you?
So for me, a couple of things, like time to impact, right? Like, I mean, you can grow the thing faster, and especially, and this is more specific for me, I am much more interested on kind of like direct to consumer products, because that's where I've had more fun. Like, I mean, what I was telling you about in Netflix or in Airbnb that we didn't discuss, but like, just like that's where I thrive, like seeing, like something where I can actually help the product get better by looking at the interaction with the customers. And for that, we need to get customers, and for that, we have to grow. And I'm not in the business of waiting for 5 years of like slow traction if I'm going to just take this as a full-time job, right? Like I appreciate the scale.
So it was very clear to you that you wanted to do a B2C business.
Yes, especially because Clarity was B2B, and it was one of the most difficult B2Bs, because most of the customers were banks or asset managers, where there's procurement and there's like timing and there's politics, and just kind of like the deal flow, the deal movement is extremely slow.
And not about the product or the technology, right?
And when you are doing B2B, one of the things that happens, or at least in Clarity it happened, is that the decision maker, the person that actually buys, is different than the user. So the user is not that important. And that's, as somebody that likes product and likes kind of like having an impact, that is very frustrating, right? Like, you're kind of like building a product that basically checks all the marks, but then nobody uses or loves. For me, it wasn't something that I wanted to repeat. And by the way, the product that Clarity is doing is amazing, it's very lovable, but this decoupling between buyer and user, I really don't like it. Yeah.
And then, like, this is one, I can imagine this was one of the things that you want to be aligned with the co-founders. Another one, imagine, was like, I want to build something where the product is very important. Yeah. What else were things that you brought from all your experiences?
Well, Jorge didn't want to do hardware again, which I understand as well. It was more about like also making sure that the three of us would be able to provide value, right? So like, my expertise is clearly, like machine learning, data, algorithms, and whatnot. Like, that's something that had to be there. At the end, like in insurance, there's a lot of prediction, but there's optimization. There's like there's a lot of interesting problems about like how to serve customers better at a better price. For Jorge, is engineering, so it's typically easy. His only request was, let's not do hardware again, which we'll see if we end up doing some of that, but later. And on Daval, I think it was also the B2B, and yeah, a little bit about the margin, which is funny because insurance,
it's not the best. Auto insurance is not the best way for margins, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So he had to give on that one.
We all had to at some point, but it was important. I mean, you can try to pick and choose, but reality, I mean, at some point, it's like, as I was saying, like once you spend enough time like trying to solve a problem and understand like the value that you're providing to the users and what makes it interesting, then I guess you start compromising.
And then, like, how about the culture? Like, what did you expect from the company?
What do I expect from the company?
Like, when you were starting, like, what do you want to be different from the other companies? People-wise, how do you run the stuff? The team?
Nothing in my side, a lot in others. So my take on culture, which is different than that of Daval, and especially Daval, I think, is that culture happens. So I think the most important thing in my experience is how the founders behave with each other. That's what actually gets amplified. You can write whatever you want in your mission statement and in your culture statement. It will not change anything. It's more about like, do we, especially us, because that's we are three. Like, I don't know, but I think like you are really setting example in how you behave, how you disagree, how you support each other, how do you deal with like difficult situations, how do you think about customers, how do you think about like what is that the company is actually providing value, how do you deal with your work-life balance, how do you treat employees when they have problems, how do you deal with customers when they have problems. I I don't think it's about being different. It's about like setting a good example, and that's why I'm so happy that we started. You know, the three of us having a very solid foundation and understanding of the human quality of each other. Right, like we had already gone through difficult times, and we knew what was in there. So that's my take on it. We tried a lot of things that did not work, such as we don't need an org chart, and everybody can do whatever they want, and so all those things sound good and empowering. At the end, if they produce confusion, they are not really. So we did a couple of experiments in terms of like how we organize. I do think that we are like way flatter and faster, especially than insurance companies, right? But most of the things that work have happened organically. We have allowed them to happen, right? That's true. But I don't think I don't think our plans. I think it mattered that we had a plan and that we cared about culture and about like how we organize.
You behaved well.
Yeah, but there's this like funny oxymoron for me. Like all the startups don't like want to be flat and have less structure and everybody. But if you impose that, that is a way of not allowing the company to actually organize, right? And I think there's a lot of pushing for no structure that is detrimental, and especially when you have like businesses like, I mean, in software, a lot of things are allowed, but we have operations, we have a lot of customer support, we have claims servicing, we are a regulated company, right? So there's just so much that you can do without.
And it changed a lot over time, that's naturally, right?
We've been, yeah, like every year we are trying to iterate. Sometimes you feel like you're going in circles as well,
And go back to what you were doing before.
and that's a clear sign that you still don't have the right solution.
Yes.
Yes, but it's important that you are intentional. I'm not. I think you shouldn't be very attached to the actual plan. You know what I mean? You have to be listening, and you have to be focusing on, okay, what is working, what's not working, what can we do, what is people thinking. But when this is all a reaction on like how did I expect that the company was going to be different. Like, I think you shouldn't expect anything, just be open, because it's very difficult to. We knew nothing about insurance when we set up Justus, like literally nothing.
Yeah, I want to get into the Justus idea and everything, but one thing that wasn't very obvious to me is that like you and Jorge are like very engineering, right? Overall, so
I'm less. Yeah, I'm more math than engineering, to be
I
honest.
see.
Yeah.
So like for the composing team, it was like we bring Jorge because he can run like the whole building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You were like, I can solve most of the complex problems that we will face,
Yeah.
and all the rest. Well,
Yeah. Exactly.
okay, cool. And then so you
They work much more than I do, I think.
I mean, well, smart work, right?
I don't know.
And then like looking at all these ideas possible, so you Spanish, Jorge Mexican, Davao is Indian, and you guys say, let's go to Brazil.
Yes.
How does this happen?
Dawal had lived here for 8 years. He started already like a small fund. He had like a lot of connection with Brazil. Miraculous was also focused on kind of like more LATAM. I'm not super interested in giving people in the US more comfort. I like that you can actually make a difference with the product you make. So we looked at very many different things. We were also looking into Europe, but there was not much. So kind of like LATAM was a great market. Brazil is a very big part of LATAM. You could argue it's not LATAM, it's Portugal or whatever. And we found like an opportunity that made a lot of sense for us. So like, you know, like insurance in Brazil can be much better. Like a lot of people are underinsured or insured by these like cooperativas that are not regulated. There's not a lot of digital insurers, even though the population is very digital. There were a lot of kind of like interesting things pointing towards that. At the beginning, I think the plan of because Daval and Jorge both moved to Spain, so we're thinking about like building something in Spain. But then, you know, like the business that made sense was in Brazil, so that's what we did.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
And why did it make sense? You know, you stated all of this, but was it mostly because you were like, okay, so auto insurance is poorly priced? Is it mostly because it's hard to buy, or all of these combined?
There's a lot of. One is what is it? Ignorance is bold, right? Like, but I think I was right. Insurance pricing is not very sophisticated, and we could get that better. I think at this point that's on the way to be proven, but it's looking good.
In curiosity, I'm an insurance broker.
Mm-hmm.
I have an insurance broker license.
Great.
So I had to learn how they price the insurance. They do averages.
Maybe
Pretty much.
some of them. So it depends on. But there were a number of things, right? One is like if we do it on the phone, we can get more behavioral signals that are more important. I mean, it shouldn't be that important that you are like 24 years old or 34, or that you are male or female or whatever, right? What should matter is how you drive. If I can get better information about like how you drive, then I should be able to price you better, and then we can find you don't need to get all the market. If you get the good drivers and give them good prices, you have an amazing business. So that was one part. The other part was the product itself can be better, right? Like we can give people more things, so we can incentivize them to drive better. We can give them rewards for behaving the way that eventually is better for them as well. And we can build something that is more engaging and that, you know, especially when you need to use it, it works. And you can file your claim in your phone. If you have like a third party that needs to file the claim, you can just give them a link so that they do it immediately. If you need a guincho, you shouldn't be in the dark about like when is your guincho going to arrive. I mean, that's something that Uber had already solved a while ago. So we saw like product opportunities, we saw pricing opportunities, and we saw kind of like a business opportunity, and it kind of like made sense for the three of us. So there was like this detail that it was in Brazil, so we decided that Brazil is a great place to build the business.
Once you guys started like pitching the VCs and stuff, what was the vision that you guys were pitching from the beginning?
Pretty much that, like a fairer price, better product, digital insurance. One way of saying it was that we were going to do to the insurance market what Nubank did to the banking market in Brazil, which is a good pitch for a VC that knows about it, especially one that has backed Nubank. Yes.
Was it Kazakh the first?
Yeah, Kazakh was the first thing.
I see. Overall, one thing that I've heard a lot in insurance in Brazil is kind of like that product matters way less than distribution overall, except for auto insurance, which what matters the most is pricing.
Well, so far we've done auto.
Auto and health, actually.
Huh?
They said that for auto and health.
Yeah, so I do think that distribution is very important, no matter the pricing, but pricing is also very important. The good thing is that you have a lot of visibility, both in where the market is at, and I mean, like the thing that for us right now, and we are getting out of that now, is the bootstrapping. So at the beginning, you just don't have data to price, right? Like that. So we had to make do with whatever public data was available, and then kind of like iterating fast. And I'm very happy that we went through like these first years without that much data, with a loss ratio that is decent. It keeps getting better and better as we learn, right? And as we get better customers, we learn both how to price, but also how to underwrite. And but pricing is important, but it's solvable. Distribution is very, very important.
And how were you guys thinking about distribution at this point?
How are we thinking?
No, back in the day, like when you guys were starting, like did you have this clarity that like was very important to have like strong distribution channels and all?
Yes. Ideally, that we would have like a diverse set of distribution channels, which we are working towards.
Is one of the big focus now?
What is?
Is like one of the focuses of the company.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's multiple focuses, but yes, definitely growing the business that we have, thinking about like new lines of business, and scaling, which is a lot of distribution, right? Like, I mean, embedded and brokers, as you.
Yes, exactly.
And that's also like an interesting thing to think about, because it's not just your users, your brokers are your users as well, and they need a product, and they need CX, and they need, because at the end you have like all these like kind of like external sellers that also get to have an amazing experience, right? That get to get better tools for their own business because they are entrepreneurs. Like, how do they advertise? How can we help them getting more customers? How can we help them getting more visibility? How can we help them identify the right customers for Justos? It's kind of like another level. At the beginning, when we started, we were just thinking about the users, and now we are thinking about.
You weren't like expecting that you'd have to rely so much on the brokers.
We didn't know, and the thing like insurance is again, we didn't know anything about insurance, and it's an interesting product to sell, right? Because it's very complex. People don't want to think about it.
They just want it to work when they have a problem, right? And
Yes,
take very little for
and
it.
they want to trust it.
Yeah.
So starting an insurance company is a very difficult thing, because you have to build trust where there's no history. You have to make it somewhat decidable. It's. I mean, I'm happy that we are here, but like, if I had known what it was going to take, probably we would have picked a different project.
And you mentioned the WhatsApp group, right? That was kind of like the first MVP.
Yeah.
How was that?
That WhatsApp group is very fun. Every year we just try to keep it interesting. No, at the beginning we had no idea what we were doing, so we're like using it for like pitching ideas. Like, whenever I go back on the WhatsApp group, like I see like, like all the highs and lows, like, like it's
It was a group of the customers.
No, this is just like double Jorge and I.
Okay.
No, like for customers we have plenty of other channels. Like we get every feedback of the customer shows up in like some Slack channel, listened by many people. With customers is all in Slack.
And what was the first thing you launched, like that drivers touched?
What is the first thing that we launched? So insurance, meaning like the first product. So we started selling insurance under like with Excelsior, which is like as an MGA, as a managing general
Let me just explain. Galera, para quem não manja do mercado de seguradora, tipo assim, você tem a seguradora que tem a licença da SUSEP, que é basicamente permite você dar o seguro tal e tudo mais. Aí chega a startup zona, que não tem dinheiro direito, não tem muito know-how, não tem marca e tudo mais, não pode chegar fazendo seguro tal, porque o mercado é regulado. Então o que ele faz? Chega lá o Antônio, todo esperto, mestre da matemática, chega junto da galera que já tem uma licença de seguradora e fala assim, irmão, vamos fazer o seguinte, você me empresta a tua licença, eu distribuo, eu faço o produto, eu faço a treta inteira, e aí fica no teu balanço, tu me dá uma comissão, se der merda, a gente aí se ferra junto. Esse é o modelo de MGA, que é o MGA que ele tá falando aqui.
Yes, right? Yes. And there's an extra complication in getting MGA, which was, I think that was one of the most tricky things that especially Double managed to get. So you want, as a new company, right? So you say, okay, well, I want to be an MGA for somebody. So that somebody has to be a company that has auto, but is not doing auto, because if they are doing auto, they are not.
They have the license, but they're not doing it.
But they are not using it for auto, right?
Yeah.
So then you go to the company and say, hey, I want to sell auto for you. And like, yeah, but like, I mean, but you don't know anything.
Yeah, who are you?
So, so we want a reinsurer. We want to get, like, they don't want the risk. They just want the commission, right? So then you have to find a reinsurer. But the reinsurer is not going to work with you. It's going to work with them.
Yes.
But then you have to make it so that you convince the reinsurer to work with the insurer. But again, you are nobody. And you have to figure out like a way to make that three-way work.
It's a new reinsurer, not the one that it was using before, right?
No, it has to be like somebody that wasn't working with them, because the Excelsior. So that took a bit. That was quite the lift.
Let me explain as well.
To make it happen.
Reinsurer ou resseguro, que é basicamente quando você tem uma seguradora e a seguradora ela não pode tomar todo o risco para ela. Então ela pega parte do risco e ela vende para uma resseguradora, que é alguém que vai pegar e vai tomar parte, que é tipo assim, se der uma merda colossal, sobra no ressegurador, se for uma merdinha, fica na seguradora e divide a treta aí com eles.
Yes. Exactly. So that was an interesting lift. Once we had that, we launched the first kind of
like there was an app, or was it just like
always? Yeah, there was always an app. Yes. So the app. So we did a lot of iterations on this, because we do have a driving test that is important, because the people that really do badly in the driving test, you really don't want to give them insurance. I mean, you could give them insurance, but for a price that they wouldn't pay.
What's the driving test?
It's just driving 80 kilometers with the app.
Was the app tracking your location and speed?
Yeah, exactly. So like we use the accelerometers and the GPS to just figure out, like if you're swerving, accelerating, braking. Most of the people pass the driving test, but the ones that don't are very important for the business.
Man, I remember when I first heard of you guys, the reference from the US was Metro Mile, right? That was doing something.
It was Route or Metro Mile, it depends.
Metro Mile didn't do that well, right? After it IPO'd and everything.
Metro Mile was bought by Lemonade, and Lemonade is doing well. But doing well, like insurance companies, insurance businesses they take a while. Metro Mile was acquired by Lemonade.
I see. It was a strong reference at this point.
It was, so Root was a better reference in a way, because Metro Mile had a dongle, like had an OBD, so it had a hardware device that you plug in. Just remember, no hardware. No, and also like distribution of hardware is tricky, right? Especially when you are starting.
Yeah, much better if they already have the phone, right? It didn't have to do anything.
So we decided to go with the phone, which was good. Like it proved like it works, and it's much easier for the users, because even the driving test. So at the beginning we made it so you have to get the app, then do the driving test. Then if you pass the driving test, then you can buy. That adds so much friction in the process until the actual purchase, right? So eventually we were able to flip it so that you buy and then you do the driving test. Most of the people are going to pass. And the ones that don't, let's see how we help them either find another another insurer, or
Yeah, send this shit to the competitor.
I mean, no, it's not necessarily, it's our perception of it, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. My sense is that it's not great risk, yes. Um, but yeah, like, I mean, and these many, yeah, like, somebody's, one man's trash is
Man,
another's treasure.
man, but like you, based on the driver's test, you would price them differently, I'd imagine. So if they're paying before,
Not really. So there's two different steps. One is if you pass the driving test, you're in, and then every month, depending on how you drive, you get a discount. So if you drive well, then you get a discount. If you don't drive well, then you just get the original price.
and how much cheaper does it get?
It's around 30%. Yeah, around 30%, 25 to 30% for
From
the
market
best drivers from your price. So like when you join, like say like it was 100 reais a month. If you drive very well, next month it'll be 75.
And compared
And
to
then-
market?
Compared to market, we are like always like on the cheaper side. Yeah. Not the cheapest. So the thing is like we don't want to build like a very cheap product. We want to build a great product that has a competitive price. And I think that difference is important because there are other insurance companies going for the absolute cheapest. That's not necessarily a product you want to use or that you want to grow. We are trying to give our users the best service at a very, very competitive price. So we are much cheaper than Porto, but we are not necessarily cheaper than, I don't know, like Azul, but you are getting a much better service.
And like overall, there's a side of the product which is the technology itself, the underwriting and everything, but there's also another side which is the insurance product itself, right? Which is like how much you're gonna have of franquias, how much you're gonna
Yeah.
have of like aggregated services.
Yeah.
And how did you guys build the product around that?
Well, we decided to go for billetes, which is the only way that we could actually do this monthly discount thing. So I think like in a normal insurance product, you cannot give monthly discounts, right? Because it's an annual product. So we decided to go monthly. Now we are starting to think about like how to give these kind of like discounts on an annual product because that especially on the broker channel, that's the way that the market works. So it's difficult to get renewals that are coming from yearly into a monthly product because commissions don't work that way,
Yes.
right? So that's kind of like a full circle that we are doing, but we can do it now because of all the other things that we've built in the process, right? Because now we understand like how to give something of value to the customers on a monthly basis that is not necessarily money.
And over the years, you said there were like a lot of challenges and trying to learn more about how to build the great product, and most of the growth has been over the last year from what we were talking before.
Yeah, we focused a lot. So last year we focused on really improving our product, meaning claim servicing is much faster, the app is better, we get a lot of rewards given to our customers, the app works the way it should work, the product for our CSAT is just on the up and up, our metrics are all going in the right direction, and at that point we decided to grow. One of the things that was important also was deciding which channels were working and which weren't. So that was part of all the experimentation in the first part. You don't step on the gas on a channel that isn't efficient. So
And what were some channels that failed?
mostly performance marketing, to be honest. Like at least for insurance, it's a very so I think something that we still have pending is more like kind of like organic SEO, which is kind of like a long grind. But at least like performance marketing is not something that maybe once we have enough brand awareness and recognition, and it will be something that makes sense. But as a new brand, it's just not.
Didn't work well. It was very competitive prices.
It's too expensive.
Hard to differentiate.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we got it. It's the kind of thing that you can like think you are going to get it, right? Like in 6 months, I think we got like 75% down on CAC. So you're like, okay, I'm going to get here. But then you realize that you still have another 75%. And it's like, okay, maybe this is not going to be now, right?
Not the path we need to take, right?
Yeah.
Man, I just learned that we're out of time for the podcast. Damn, I should have talked more about Junte-se.
That's okay.
But man, I love all the stories that you told. Thank you so much for coming over. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, subscribe for the channel. And man, thanks so much again.
All right. Thank you.